Hey everyone, this is Lauren Eckert coming to you with a quick programming note, opening note before we get into today's interview. I am so delighted to interview our guest today, Rebecca Martin, who has fundamentally shaped a lot of my career via National Geographic Society, via her work, and many others. I just want to mention that at one point, Rebecca kindly offers accolades for some of the work I have done at the interface of Indigenous knowledge and ecology. And I haven't really talked much about my research in depth on this channel yet, and am always a little uncomfortable receiving praise for my research in the context of it being in partnership with Indigenous communities or about Indigenous knowledge. So I just wanted to take a moment at the top to say I'll hyperlink a couple articles that I have co-authored with Indigenous colleagues and with other researchers, and state really clearly that while I'm grateful for Rebecca's kind words about my work, I have been lucky to be a really small part of ongoing Indigenous-led projects. And I think it's just important to be clear about my small place in the greater scheme of things on Indigenous-led work, because there is such historical and modern prevalence of white savior narratives. But I have been really lucky to be a tiny piece of the puzzle, invited by nations who are already engaging in this work, have been for a really long time, and are leaders of a lot of the research projects I've been a part of. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, and I'm excited to launch into this interview. Let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reimagined, a Hidden Compass YouTube series. I am your host, Lauren Eckert, and I am so excited to be joined today by someone who has had a formative and wonderful impact on my own career and my own explorations, Rebecca Martin. Rebecca is the founder and president of Explorer Connections and has spearheaded pivotal programs at National Geographic for many decades, cultivating extensive networks of explorers during her career. Rebecca was the senior director of Explorers programs at National Geographic, where she significantly expanded the National Geographic Awards program to my own and many other young people's benefits. So Rebecca is responsible for forwarding and expanding things like the Young Explorers, now called early career grants, to people 18 to 25 and now beyond, which gave people like me really early in our career an opportunity to engage with National Geographic, which opened so many endless doors. That has been pivotal in my life and many others I know. Rebecca's accomplishments go far beyond National Geographic. She's also been recognized by Outside Magazine on the Power List of the 25 most influential people in the outdoor world. She holds an MA in International Education from George Washington University and a BA in Literature. Rebecca, I'm so excited to have you here today with me. You have shaped, as we were discussing before the interview, much of the way I think about reimagining exploration, and much of the way my life has unfolded via opportunities, training, friendships, adventures with National Geographic. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's my great pleasure, Lauren. It's wonderful to see you doing this program, and yeah, I've greatly enjoyed. I think one of my greatest pleasures in working at National Geographic was working with yourself and all of the other young explorers, and you all give me tremendous hope for the future of the planet. So
It's mutual hope, Rebecca, that's for sure. And I have to tell listeners that anytime I was at Society for a large scale event with National Geographic, Rebecca would be the one walking around making sure everyone was eating enough and getting enough sleep. She had a very holistic model of caring about us, not only about our adventure, but also about our fundamental individual well-being, which was greatly needed because the excitement of a National Geographic Society event can often lead you to forget to eat and sleep. So Rebecca held our hands through many a fun and exciting event.
yeah, no, again, my pleasure. And that's the holistic picture is the way I always work with explorers, because they're doing unique work, and sometimes it involves an additional layer of stress, and can be physically challenging, and a lot of the young explorers were working on their graduate degrees at the same time, and
Oh yeah.
so yeah, taking good care of yourself and sort of making sure you feel like you're on solid ground as you're doing, juggling so many balls is essential. It's
Becca was our tether to the earth. Yeah.
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 Laura,
Amazing. Well, there are so many things we could talk about today. You've had so many impacts on so many people and worked to build so much throughout your career and continue to, as we were just talking about. But I want to focus in on the theme of this month with the Hidden Compass Reimagined series, which is exploration. Obviously, a lot of your life and career has been built around the idea of exploring, explorers, expanding what it means to be an explorer. And what we've been talking about this month is this idea of the fact that exploration or explorers comes with a heavy baggage set in the context of, colonial pasts and presents. And I'm interested to get your take. I guess this is a bit of a two-part question. The first being, what does exploration now mean to you? And the second is, how do we collectively grapple with that history of exploration?
well, I don't think I ever create absolute boundaries around the definition of exploration, because I think every day as we learn more and we watch what people are doing and we observe what's going on around the planet, our definition of what exploration is will evolve. But I do believe that exploration, it's still very much in the process of becoming um, something more than a Western notion. And I think that it's becoming much more inclusive and diverse, and those who are sort of in Western society, heavily engaged in exploration, are recognizing, wait a minute, there are scientists in developing countries around the world doing incredible work, and indigenous peoples, they have this huge knowledge base. So to say that you've discovered something in an area where indigenous people live or did live, and not acknowledging them and not engaging them and trying to look at the world through their eyes. So I know you, Lauren, are very, very sensitive to and engaged in scientific research that looks at indigenous perspective on their lands, and I believe that exploration most definitely should move beyond being just a Western centric, going into a place, learning about it, and not looking at indigenous knowledge, belief systems, and the fact that they know the place. So it's a whole, I think it's a whole new approach. And I think that the mindset of exploration is still in the process of evolving beyond the colonialistic approach.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah, so it's if you're people like yourself and myself who are working in the field of exploration, just constantly keep our finger on the pulse and remind people when they forget. And for instance, I'm working on a new grant program now, and we require, as we did at Nat Geo, that local collaborators are included in research teams. And maybe that collaborator can't apply for a grant. Maybe their English isn't strong enough to apply for that grant, but they should be a part of the team. And then how has exploration changed? I mean, now we're looking at how the world is evolving, and that's really become when I just look at the applications coming into this particular grant program I'm working on, very focused on conservation and grappling with the you know major problems that our world is facing today in terms of climate and other environmental um, challenges and so we've seen a place, but we know that it's changed significantly over time.
Mhm.
I was just in fact looking through I did a review of a book, Atlas of a Changing Climate, from
Oh,
Hi Brian Booma, is a professor at University of Colorado in Denver, and it has beautiful scientific, historic illustrations of um, island nations, where scientists traveled 400 years ago. And then you see over time how these lands through, I mean, pre-photography, but through their observations and their art, how the environment is changing.
wow.
And it goes all the way to the present with, all the high-tech imagery of the environment. And so, I mean, yes, the planet is in a process of constant change, but we've just seen so much dramatic change in the last couple of several decades. And
Yeah.
so, and particularly, I would say in the last decade,
Yeah.
and now it's just trying to keep on top of how environments are changing, how the vegetation is changing, and the climate and the oceans and the acidification, and there's so much going on. That said, it does not mean that there are not still new places to
Totally.
uncover. I mean, 90% of the ocean that still has yet to be explored. And
Yeah.
there are archaeological sites and paleontological sites beneath our feet, and cave systems. And I mean, there's always new knowledge that can be generated. And some of it is going back to the places we thought we knew, or,
Yes.
I mean, just slightly getting off the beaten path, even
Right.
if you're going on a journey in the Gobi Desert that an explorer did, like a century ago. But if you go off the beaten path of their journey, you probably will find something new.
Absolutely.
So it's, there are always these nooks and crannies in places that you believe you already know. And also, again, going back there today with um, an open mind about, a far more open mind about the indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, uh, and really incorporating that into your experience and your research.
Absolutely. There's so much you just shared that is wonderful, and I want to highlight. I feel like it could go a million different directions, but so one really formative aspect of being involved with young explorers are the other young explorers, are the other people that you get to spend a ton of time with and build relationships with. And uh, I feel like the expansion of exploration outside of this, colonial, fundamentally racist construct it was historically based in, to have explorers as Indigenous scholars, as you know, uh, local scholars doing work in the areas where they grew up, has allowed me to follow the lead of those people and learning new things. So you bring people who are redefining exploration through action, and through their ability to be part of the National Geographic Young Explorers program. So I definitely agree that things are changing.
We'll see.
So yeah, for listeners, Rebecca has paused a few times on Zoom, so we're hopping back in and out, but we're making it work, our virtual interview. But yeah, a really foundational aspect of the Young Explorers process has been being able to be exposed to Indigenous scholars and scholars working in their home communities uh, towards following their lead and understanding what exploration might look like done in a better and more inclusive way. And I've learned so much from those people, and I'm so grateful for their friendship and guidance. And I really liked your commentary that exploration is constantly in a state of transformation. Often what comes to mind now when I think about where new discoveries that matter most are going to emerge, I'm biased as a conservation scientist, but you brought up that much of exploration, writing, scholarship, adventure now focuses on how rapidly things have changed, but also solutions to fight degradation, to fight biodiversity loss, to build better futures for social justice are emerging as ways to explore. Explore can mean exploring potential conservation technology solutions. Exploring can mean sitting down with 5 groups of stakeholders and seeking to find, exploring people's opinions to find common ground or solutions. So I really like that expansive definition of exploration, that it's not just physical, it's also about perspectives, it's about relationships. And in an era increasingly in need of creative solutions and new ways to see the world, exploration can mean something kind of abstract but really important. And I think a cool aspect of what you discussed in terms of returning to places and finding them changed is also that as the field broadens to become a more realistic representation of the world that we live in, the perspectives applied to things that maybe only white wealthy men saw 50 or 100 years ago is leading us to learn a ton of new things. Or when Indigenous scholars are at the podium, they're able to speak to Indigenous discoveries that occurred thousands of years ago. So yeah, I really I loved that expansive answer about the transforming definition of exploration, and that exploration is more than physical. I really relate to that, especially in the work I do. Yeah, and I appreciate that answer. In your ideal world, if you were to look at 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, given that exploration will continue to evolve, what do you think it will look like?
That's very interesting question. I mean, I just got off of a Zoom call where one of our great astronauts in this country, Ed Liu, is working with a huge team to map the solar system for asteroids in order
Wow.
to help avoid catastrophic events on planet Earth.
Wow.
So it's very futuristic, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's certainly a form of exploration, although they all sit, with their computers doing logarithms and, things that I can't even imagine because that's definitely not my field, but it's fascinating to listen to. But I think, I mean, it is my hope that we will provide more and more opportunities to Indigenous peoples, to people, in countries where it's harder to find support for scientific research and conservation, that I think it will be much more diverse in the future. I think, and therefore there will be many more diverse voices involved, and that will only, I think, ultimately help us better solve the problems that we face, because those Indigenous
Absolutely.
knowledge systems, they might have better ideas in terms of conservation just based upon their myths and legends and their also their understanding of their landscape, their constant interaction with their landscape. And
Totally. Value systems. Yeah.
yeah, and maybe they learn something from other scientists that they can apply. So to the solving some of the problems. How do they prevent or turn around desertification where they live? And reestablish grasslands. It's possible. It happened in Tibet.
Totally.
And so you know, I think collaboration is going to be the winning way to exploration being far more beneficial
Yeah.
to all of us, to the
Mhm.
planet, and for we are part of the planet.
Yeah.
And so and that the collaborative spirit that moves us out of the colonialistic
Totally.
exploitative approach to exploration. And I keep thinking back to Sir Edmund Hillary, who I had the first person to climb Everest with Tenzing Norgay. And he spent the rest of his life not going after other peaks. His thing, he was a humble beekeeper from New Zealand who liked to climb mountains because there were mountains in New Zealand and had this opportunity. And after that, he spent the rest of his life working with the Sherpa people,
Mm.
building hospitals, building schools. The question is, you go to a place and you get to know it. And oftentimes people become very committed to one place in particular, where they explored or carried out research, and they decide they want to spend the rest of their time giving back. I met in Indonesia. I worked with actually a French team of cave explorers who were doing some incredible cave exploration in Indonesia. And one of them, a doctor, I later met in Indonesia when organizing a Young Explorers grant workshop, or a series of them there. And he decided after his caving trip to Indonesia to move there because what he saw was a really dire situation with healthcare there,
Mhm.
and a very high rate of diabetes, and people couldn't get to doctors, didn't have money to get to doctors. And so he created a network, a free network where people could basically get all the medical advice from doctors around the world within
Amazing.
within like 5 minutes max. They could get medical advice, and be told where to go if they needed insulin or whatever. So he moved there and he made it his life's work to help the people there. And I think it is, that exploration needs to be driven also by empathy, you
Hmm.
know, and compassion, um, for the people's, like, where you're exploring. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, maybe in Antarctica there aren't any, but empathy and compassion for the wildlife that's there.
Totally.
So
I think that's so valuable, Rebecca. I think, a word that comes to mind of what you're describing is reciprocity. But reciprocity has historically not been a fundamental part of exploration. And I think of the words of Asha DeVos, who I'll link in the notes for this episode, who speaks a lot to the problems with parachute science. And
mhm,
obviously that's exploitative, it's very problematic. And I think one reason that parachute science is so problematic, explorers or researchers, particularly white, particularly privileged, dropping in to less privileged places, extracting knowledge or data and leaving, is because it lacks this model of compassion and reciprocity. And I really like the idea that that hopefully in the future can become a fundamental aspect of exploration, that if you're exploring, you're doing so from a community driven perspective or a community care orientation. You know, we talk a lot about self-care modernly, which is great, we should. But community care is something we're only beginning as a Western society to understand the value of. And so I love these examples you provided of reciprocity, of people who, you know, may have built their life or experiences on their privilege, which allowed them to go to these places, and then recognize the need for reciprocity. It's really wonderful. And what strikes me, something that gives me hope in the face of conservation and social justice challenges, is that what makes our species unique evolutionarily isn't, I mean, it is how smart we are, but a lot of animals are incredibly smart. One thing that makes our species really unique is our ability for collaboration and compassion. You know, historically, when we look at what allowed people to evolve into this society we now live in, much of it early on was our ability to communicate and collaborate. And so I love the idea that collaboration and reciprocity can usher in a new era of a different type of exploration, a more inclusive type of exploration. I'm conscious of time and don't want to keep us too long, but you have accomplished so much in your life. You've opened so many doors. As you've alluded to, you have conversations with really incredible people, and you continue to do really amazing work, consulting and leading and putting on events and promoting new ways of exploration. Oh, it was inevitable. Hold on. I'm sending the boy to take care of them. There are geese outside that they like to bark at. Anyways, so I'm wondering, Arrow.
Commentary
She has some things to say.
from the canine unit.
Yeah, she has some things to say. Given all of your experiences and continuing experiences, you know, we live in an era where a lot of this stuff is really hard. Conservation challenges are massive. We're facing environmental crises, climate crises, as you described. Things are changing really fast. What drives you to keep pushing for collaborative research or conservation storytelling, or, you know, adventure and exploration? What motivates you in the face of the challenges you've faced throughout your life to keep going?
Well, I believe that the stories that are derived from exploration educate and inspire and motivate people. And you know, I think most people are naturally driven to want to learn about the world. Maybe they are at times, especially today, feeling a little overwhelmed with, you know, the gloom and doom news. But I think if they see that there are explorers who I consider to be problem solvers out there in the world, working away, which is, you know, as I say, one of the huge reasons that I found the Young Explorer program to be so incredibly meaningful to me, is that there are indeed, you know, given some, just a little bit of resource, you know, people all over the world will go out and do work because they care about, you know, whale sharks, or they care about bees, or they care about an indigenous people, or whatever it is, you know, indigenous people, group that's being, many are being deeply affected by climate change. So these are problem solvers going out into the world, and they're also many of them, especially your generation, are natural storytellers. I mean, you've grown up with these vehicles through which you know, it can be in-depth, or it can be very quick storytelling to get the word out, to communicate to people. It's the norm, and everybody's devouring that content. So I think to the extent we have these inspirational people out there, it will help lift, you know, the world at large, and elevate the world at large in terms of realizing there are still possibilities. We can deal with problems, you know. Maybe how do we adapt to some extent to climate change, which you know, many peoples are having to do, but you know, then what can we do in our own lives to reverse, or you know, at least bring to some sort of um, uh, cessation what's going on with the um, the changing climate. So yeah, I just feel like explorers, you know, since the beginning of time, people who have journeyed out, and you know, if it's Lewis and Clark, or and Sacagawea, and or Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo, or I mean, people bring back knowledge of places and get people excited about the world. So that aspect, even going back into history, is important. It's, you know, the knowledge gained, but now, as you say, it's more, you know, reciprocity, a more reciprocal kind of experience, and it fosters a far better understanding of why things matter, you know, why the forests matter, why the indigenous people matter, why people should care. And without the explorers and scientists basically bringing forth these gems of knowledge, you know, I think we would be in uh, on a far worse trajectory than we are now.
I really value that answer. What comes to mind as you're talking about it are my experiences at National Geographic headquarters. I think about the National Geographic leadership program that I was so privileged to be a part of, a year-long mentorship and leadership program. Rebecca's also done a ton of work to create mentorship opportunities and formal programs at National Geographic. We could do a whole nother interview about that. That has also been such a source of growth and friendship and mentorship for me and many others. But I I think of that program, and one night we were sitting around a dinner table with National Geographic staff. There were 15 of us involved in the program, and we realized that among the 15 of us, we represented 11 countries and 25 languages. And I learned that those people are still so, I spent, you know, a week with a group of individuals that still remain incredibly important to me in my life as friends, as colleagues, as collaborators. And I'm sure those opportunities to tell stories together and learn from each other will continue. And you mentioned Prosenjit, who's a National Geographic explorer, photographer, storyteller, who's telling stories about his home in a way that not only has allowed me to learn so much and be inspired by the places and the work he does, but also he, you know, finds opportunities to uplift kids in his community to learn about what he's doing. Dr. Andrea Reed comes to mind, who is a Niska fisheries scientist, who is now a UBC professor, who has had funding from National Geographic early in her career. And, you know, this idea that in many cases, the best people to convince others to care about their community or about a species of local concern are people who are part of those communities, which is this great evolving model of exploration that I think things like the Young Explorers program have allowed. And the last thing I'll say is, when you talk about hope in storytellers, a lot of my hope, you know, conservation and storytelling and exploration can sometimes feel isolating. I think especially during the time of COVID, when much of that is occurring, sitting at computers, maybe modeling, maybe storytelling, maybe crunching data, maybe walking around looking for bear poop in the rain. But when you gather together with a community of people who share this common desire to tell stories to make a better world, as is the case when involved at, say, National Geographic Explorers Fest, it is such a feeling of there are immense challenges we're facing, but the spirit of human ingenuity and collaboration is immense enough to overcome it if we give it the space and time and resources. So that is one thing I'm really grateful to you for is fostering those communities. And there are many of them outside of National Geographic and will continue to be, but that's where hope springs forth for me in a world where goodness knows we're facing a lot collectively. So yeah, Rebecca, I'm so grateful for your time and everything you've ever done. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign
Well,
off?
thank you so much for having me on your program. I really appreciate it. And you are one of the people who give me great hope for the future of the planet. So keep up the good work, keep collecting that bear poop and doing your work with indigenous communities. And it's so important. And every single person who does this kind of work, you and the other young explorers, and you know people who are out there beyond those who we've known as part of the Young Explorer program. I mean, there are so many people doing really good work, and we just need to get the stories out there and to keep sharing the knowledge and enlightening the world with the knowledge you're gleaning from your work and the stories that you tell. I mean, it's making a huge difference, and so keep it up, and
Thank you,
everybody else
Rebecca.
out there who listens to this, don't hesitate. Everything you do makes every step you take, everything you do makes a huge difference. And do it with compassion, do it with your heart, and I think you'll make the world a better place, and you'll also feel immensely fulfilled at the same time.
A reminder I very much needed this morning on this rainy day in a canvas wall tent, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Here she is providing care again from afar. Well, thank you so much. Everyone will be back next week with a new episode of Reimagine My Hidden Compass. And I'm grateful for everyone. And please take Rebecca's words to heart. We can make a difference as trite as it may sound, and we need everyone in these challenging times. So thank you, and get out there and tell stories.